Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents, a special mini-series called Up and Running with Red Hat Satellite. This is episode 4 in our mini-series. I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and joining me for this mini-series is a special guest, a good friend of mine, Mr. Richard Rios. Welcome back.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everyone. I know it's been a while.
It's only been a week. But it feels like a while.
Yes, it does. A lot of things have transpired in a week.
Yeah, a little bit. So let's review what we've done so far. If you'd like to join the conversation, go ahead and click that. Go ahead and scan that QR code. That'll take you to our RHEL live streaming Discord server. There's almost 200 of us now hanging out, talking about everything from OpenSCAP to satellite to hopefully we get some nerds in there talking about some gaming or something. I think we need like a community D&D campaign or something. But that's not what we're reviewing, but definitely join the conversation. So over the course of the last few episodes, this is episode 4. I would have loved to have seen like 10 episodes, but sadly, we're getting into conference season and release seasons coming up, so things are about to get kind of crazy here at Red Hat. But in episode 1, took us 50 minutes, but we did it live on air. We installed a satellite server from scratch. So check out episode 1 if you want to see how to install satellite. Granted, satellite isn't included in the individual subscription, but if you check the show notes below, there is a link to a self-paced lab that we've actually been using this entire series for our content. So you can actually walk through it. It'll take you through a few things that we didn't cover here on the show, but plenty of good introductions to Red Hat Satellite.
It's a great.
Oh my gosh, such a good lab. Matthew Yee, one of my colleagues, was the one who built that lab, and I've practically lived in it for the last 5 weeks.
We're not worthy.
Yeah, exactly. Episode 2, we set up repositories. We created some content views. We talked about groups and activation keys. Then last week, we did some patching. We scheduled some jobs. We talked about CVEs and CVE mitigation. But Richard, I don't know if you know this, but Red Hat Satellite is not just a patching tool.
Ooh, do tell.
Do you need a moment? Should you sit down?
It is the Swiss Army knife that nobody knew they had if they have satellite, because it could do so many things, but most organizations will use maybe 3 of the capabilities of satellite, but it can do so many things. I always go back to the thought of it is your single source of truth for your organization. You can have all your content, and I always refer to it as a content management engine, because ultimately that's what it's doing. It is pulling in all the RPMs, holding all your content, whether it be from Red Hat or it could be a third-party repo, or even if you're doing your own in-house development, and whether it be a tarball or an RPM, you can hold it within satellite and distribute it, and the versions of set files. So, which becomes really important in those mission critical environments, or when you have those air gap environments that really can't be touched into the internet, but you still want that granularity and control. Satellite just shines in that space. As a matter of fact, ships that float have been known to pull into ports if somebody walks in with a USB drive that has the content for the satellite server, so they can then patch all the systems of said ships, or even aircraft, you might say.
Yeah, so it's very true, and that's an awesome use case too. I mean, just the thought of like a cruise ship coming into port once every couple of weeks. You just carry a flash drive, copy the content over, create a new view, and there you go. All those servers, all those systems that run in the background that while you're sipping your adult beverages and getting sun, you don't really think about the fact that there's probably hundreds of systems that are running underneath the covers of something as big as a cruise ship.
Oh yeah, it's a city. right? It has
Oh, for
all the
sure.
facilities and everything you would need. And the thing is, so after you do all those things, you start thinking, what else could I do with satellite? Well, you could actually do an OpenSCAP scan. You can centralize that and scan your system, define what your environment should look like, what would meet your, let's say, if you're in an environment that needs to reach or maintain a certain compliance level, maybe see PCI compliance or any other ones that you can think of. You can actually define what that environment would look like and scan for pass, fail, and in many instances, even mitigate that delta, right?
Hmm.
So you could be looking for those possible changes, or organizations that are, let's say, maybe concerned about an incursion into their environment and somebody making changes that they're not supposed to take place. OpenSCAP could really be your best friend, especially for the SecOps team. Be able to specifically say, our environment has not changed, or we were patched on this day, and this is the security posture that we have defined, and this is what we have in place, and be able to show that not just today, but however long you've been running satellite, you have all those logs.
Yeah, OpenSCAP is a great addition to Satellite's management capabilities. In case you're not familiar, John Spinks and I last year actually did a episode on using Red Hat Insights to overcome OpenSCAP deficiencies, shall we call them? And
Hmm.
the process is fairly similar on Satellite. So, little bit of a disclaimer, and I'm kind of bummed, Richard, because
Hmm.
my satellite server here in house, as you might recall, about 2 weeks ago, uh, went belly up and died, and I just haven't had a chance to rebuild it after I fixed the DNS issues in my home lab, which it's always DNS. In case you forget, it's always DNS. Um, and so some of the registration pieces and some of the other infrastructure related stuff I'm not able to show in our satellite um, sandbox here that we have
Hmm.
today. But I did want to take a chance. I did want to take some time and walk through a couple of things that you can do from a management perspective. Um,
Hmm.
a lot of folks use tools like Kickstart or templated images that can very Kickstart becomes kind of untenable after a while, especially if a couple of generations of sysadmins have left since the original file was created. You have things like VMware templates or VM templates. Um, take it from an old gray bearded sysadmin. Those always end up just out of date. No matter how much you try, those
Yeah.
VM templates always end up just out of rotation. There, you forget a patch cycle, or you change
Hmm.
security tools or something, and you end up forgetting. And instead of fixing it in the template, you just fix it as you're building a one-off server, and just
Yeah.
it becomes more and more manual. Um, so I would like to offer up Satellite as a reasonable alternative. You can use
Hmm.
something like Image Builder to build the most vanilla, basic um, RHEL system, and
Hmm.
then use something like Satellite to then configure it. Especially if you're thinking about things like infrastructure as code. Like every system D service, every configuration file should come under infrastructure as code. That way you can commit it to either Satellite or a Git repository, and that way all of your systems, when they're built, are identical. In fact, I'm kind of liking the idea of using Satellite full time here in my home lab to manage a lot of my vanilla RHEL systems that I use for a lot of the demonstrations we do on this channel. Um,
Yeah.
and I think one of the reasons for that is the integration of something called system roles and Red Hat Satellite.
Yeah. Which is part of the OS, but it's not so you can now centrally, as you register a host or change the system role for a host from a central location, depending what group they'll belong to or what activation key they have. Those are the things that are really powerful. But as you're talking about the different templates, it makes me think of an older Michael Keaton movie called Multiplicity, in
Hmm.
which starts as the original guy, and then they clone him, and then the guy gets really busy and needs more people, so the clone makes a clone of himself, so instead of end up having a clone of a clone of a clone. And by the time of the fourth version, he's not quite right. And I that's the way sometimes it feels when you have this template has gone through all these different iterations, and people's like, "Who built the original one?" I don't know.
Right.
It works, we think, and people
So
forget
instead,
what's
you
in
can
it.
use like host groups and content
Mm-hmm.
views to define what those images look like. So why don't we dive into satellite
Mm-hmm.
here? And that seems a lot smaller than it did during sound check. There we go. That's what happens when I refresh the tab before we go live. So you'll remember we've got a production server here in RHEL 2. We've got a dev
Mm-hmm.
server in RHEL 1. And what I want to do is to be able to apply configuration at scale with Ansible system roles.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go over to our menu, look at configure. If we go down to Ansible, because system roles are basically configuration files that you build for Ansible core to then
Right.
run. So if we look at Ansible and then go into roles, there's going to be so many. I mean, it seems like every
Oh
release we come up with new with additional system roles. I mean, just looking through here, let's actually pull out the upstream here. Let's do just RHEL system roles. Let's see, how many do we have? So we're up to 24.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we've got 24 RHEL system roles. These are based on upstream system roles called Linux system roles. Everything from AD integration to configuring cockpit to KDump.
Mm-hmm.
We could do any number of these, but what I want to do is we'll work on something that just about every systems administrator has to deal with, and that's the firewall. And it makes for a
Yeah.
really easy example. So let's go in and let's define a variable here. Actually, there's an easier way to do this. I'm going to do this the way that I originally learned here, so bear with me. So let's go into host groups.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go into our production host group first. And then under Ansible roles,
Mm-hmm.
I cheated and looked it up. It's actually on page 2. We'll go to RHEL system roles firewall. So right here. For me, this interface is a little bit easier to work with. To each their own. So I'm going to click on the plus button. And what that's going to do is that's going to change the assigned Ansible roles. So now we're going to define what our RHEL firewall system role is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, we need to define our parameters. So let's go to parameters. Let's add a parameter. We're going to call it firewall, I do believe. So we're going to take type, and that's going to be an array. We're going to call this firewall. No, it's port, isn't it? Can't read my own notes.
If port is what you're trying to adjust, yes.
And then we're going to say for production, we want 443 because
Right.
we want all of our traffic to be secured. So now we can submit that. Oh, values. Oh, that's right.
Sure, you need an array.
From the documentation that I read, yes.
Okay.
So what I want.
There you go. Yes.
That's
If
what I
you're
want.
doing multiple,
So
there you go.
We're going to define. Actually, I think this does need to be firewall. So we're going to define that it's going to be for firewall. It's going to be an array. We're going to define port 443 TCP, and we're going to enable that port.
Those are the things that they would definitely want to know on the firewall side.
Yes. And so I make this I make this point because then what I want to do is go into our development environment, and we're going to do a similar process here. So if I confuse you the first time around, don't worry, I confused myself. So we're going to find RHEL system roles.firewall. We're going to add that to our configuration here. We're going to go to parameters. We're going to add a parameter. We're going to call it firewall. Array. I can't read today. And then we're going to enable port 80. So maybe in your development environment, you don't mess with SSL certificates, that kind of thing. I know back in my day, they were incredibly expensive. So non-production usually didn't have SSL enabled. maybe you still think that through. Maybe that's still how you focus.
To play devil's advocate, what if you wanted to do 480 and 443? Would you do two
Yeah.
entries?
That's a good question, and I actually don't have the answer. I'd have to pull up the documentation again, which is amazing, by the way. I was able to teach myself how to do this in less than a week. So now we've got the system roles configured. Now we need to actually apply them. So if we go into hosts, we look at all hosts. We're going to select all. No, maybe not the satellite.
Yeah,
We're
don't want to apply to the satellite server.
And then we're going to select an action. So what we're going to do under action is we're going to run all Ansible roles. So we could have come in here and configured our firewall, made changes to our SSHD configuration for remote connection. There's SE Linux, there's Podman system roles. There's 24 of them. So start using host groups and these system roles and their variables to really quickly configure your environment. So let's go ahead and run all those system roles.
When it comes to SE Linux, it's like, don't run RHEL without it.
Right.
Always have SE Linux on, please.
So right now it's getting ready to run against RHEL 1 and RHEL 2, so it'll run in production and non-production. It's pending at 100% right now. It's the fun of doing this live. Oh, there it goes. All right, so 100% success, no failures. So what that means is now we should have a firewall that's configured on both our production RHEL 2 system and our non-production RHEL 1 system. And of course, I shared a tab instead of my screen again. So let me let me switch my screen share here.
It's going all right. It's coming back.
So
I can't tell you how many times I've in my career I've told people to use SE Linux, and everyone's like, "Why? Just turn it off." It's like, no, you missed the point.
All right.
All right.
So
should be back. There we go.
All right. So now I shared the window instead of just a tab.
All right.
All right. So now we're logged in as root on RHEL 1, and so RHEL 1 is our non-production system. So what port do you think will be available?
I'm gonna guess port 80.
I guess autocomplete is not installed on this one, so it's is it list. What did I do wrong?
CMD,
Oh,
yeah, CMD. Yeah.
Helps if you put in a hyphen. I think it's just list. Oh. Sorry, I didn't copy this command down. Thanks. Joshua says it's a firewall -cmd. And it should be, let's see. I feel like a dummy here.
No, you just passed list.
Did I?
Dash. It was dash list.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Firewall cmd -- list, and that should
list all. List all. There you go.
List all. Okay. Okay, and then thank you. That took far too long. There we go. Port 80. That's what I get for doing this live. So now we're going to take the lesson learned from this server, and I'm going to just copy the stinking command, and we're going to go to RHEL 2, which, if you think about it, this is our production server. So when we look at ports,
list all,
list -all. Copy the wrong command. I'm doing great.
Yeah.
So if you look, we've got port 443. So I know that seems like a very simplistic example, but think about this. You have 1,000 RHEL servers, and it's not just web servers that you're dealing with. You've got web, you've got MySQL databases, you've got custom homegrown applications, you've got Podman containers that use their own unprivileged ports. So you could literally have thousands of ports to manage in multiple different environments. And so instead of trying to manage all that by hand, or back in my day, it was manage it all with like an Excel spreadsheet. Lord, do I not miss those
God
days.
love you.
You can do all this with a single source of truth, like Red Hat Satellite.
Yeah.
And the real lesson to be learned from this, Richard, is when you're going to do live stream, don't assume you'll remember anything.
I'm just glad I remembered my name. That's that's what I know I'm doing well.
So,
Right.
Richard, you had a couple of things you wanted to talk about as well.
And of course, I'm drawing a blank, but that's okay. Um, for me, I kind of mentioned it in the beginning a little bit about all the other capabilities within satellite. The one thing I don't think we touched upon was, for example, you want to enable the satellite agent when you're setting up satellite, just to make sure that it is by default installed. It should be, but you always want to double check. I've seen instances in which systems have been registered and they did not enable that. That can really be an issue going forward. But it's really, what are the tools you think you're going to need? Set up a repo and only show the binaries that you absolutely must have and exclude everything else. Uh, as in, if somebody were to gain authority over a host, if they can't get a certain executable to install it, you've removed yet another vector. Not just that it isn't installed, but even if they gain control, they usually need some tooling to do the things they want to do. By restricting that, once again, if they can't see it, they can't install it. So those are things I always like to bring up. Um, there's also some of the other feature sets that I don't think we're going to have enough time to talk about. Would you care to show again
Sure.
the menu? Thank you. So if we were to go into, let's see, I believe it's in the both in the host section first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if we go down to the compliance section, and I was talking about the OpenSCAP section. So this is where the magic happens in this space. You must first set up the OpenSCAP infrastructure within the satellite server, so you can then centrally create your policies and scan your systems. And in return, they'll give you a report, which was basically a pass fail. You can also import some pre-made ones that are, for PCI compliance, and some other ones that are available, and you can take those, modify them, or create your own from scratch. Those are your choices. The nice thing about those is you can scan for as much granular information and configuration as you'd like, and in many instances is able to also generate an Ansible playbook to remedy set states if there's a delta. So imagine you design your whole infrastructure and what they should look like. Any deltas that you see there, you can now very rapidly roll those back. So it can be very useful, especially in an air gap environment where you don't have internet access. That's where you know I love insights and everything you can do, but because it does require you to have a connected environment for those people who do not or have some restrictions in that space, you're able to do this quite well. Uh, the other thing that I also want to bring up, I was going to say it's not going to have any reports at this point because we have not.
We don't have that. We don't have all the prereqs
Right,
configured on
right.
this particular host.
The other thing is under the provisioning setup section, you could even set up a Pixie boot uh, within the satellite server. So if you have a network boot set up, you can utilize and leverage your satellite server to do so. It can work with multiple, let's just say a myriad of hypervisors. So if you have a VMware environment or a Hyper-V or a KVM or an OpenShift, you can still leverage everything that satellite is able to do, and in many instances, even communicate with the hypervisor, so it knows what's available, and you can pass on some information to it. Uh, and even go as far as you can create your own custom media within satellite and make that available for your build as well. And as Eric was mentioning, utilizing image builder, you can generate your images on image builder and leverage, do a handoff more or less, have your initial image being built, begin your installation, and then have it automatically register to the satellite server, and the satellite server continuing the configuration and applying additional content and be part of the fleet. All right. Even on the architecture side, you can even specify. I think, if I remember correctly, satellite can even manage some rail on power installations as
Yes, I believe so.
yes, and uh, mainframe as well. Let's
Yeah,
see.
it is an incredibly powerful tool, and this short mini series doesn't do it nearly enough justice. Um,
Yes.
if I would have had the infrastructure, we could have set up like get a DHCP servers, create some Pixie boots, and I mean, you could see how we can go from using activation keys to registering systems to applying all their patches to deploying Ansible system roles to these systems, um, using customized contents. We barely even talked about filtering. Um,
Right. There's also another component to be mindful of. So if we scroll down and go into the configuration section in the configure, you'll see there's an option there for both Ansible and Red Hat Cloud. If we go into Red Hat Cloud, you can actually configure the Red Hat Cloud connector. So satellite can be in communications with insights. So as systems are, if you're in a connected network, obviously, as you register a system, it will get the insights agent as well configured, and the information that it gathers then by the satellite server is sent to the insights portal, and you get all the reporting, all the goodness from that place, and it all works as part of one ecosystem. As well as from insights, you can begin, let's say, generate an Ansible playbook and execute that Ansible playbook to remedy the set state it has found, as one example, and it would actually send the command to the satellite server to then initiate the remediation via that playbook, which would be ad hoc or scheduled, right? But the nice thing is, it is works as one ecosystem instead of having to chase the activity, do it here, and then go here to satellite, and then no, you're able to initiate it there. Of course, could you do it separately? Yes, of course. Um, so that I find that also very useful in that space, and to just review again all the roles that are within Ansible. If you click on the Ansible option, you can see there the roles and variables that are available. So that gives you a better idea of what's going on and what variables. Does it have the firewall ones we just enacted? Don't know if
yeah,
it.
under variables. So
No,
I was interested to notice that they don't show up here, but that
yeah,
we'd have to go in through the host group route.
right. Because these will be more of global variables that you're passing. These are specific to that group, to that instead of hosts that they're consuming.
Which would make a lot of sense if you have like a web servers group
Correct.
that would install Nginx or something
Mhm.
as part of the group's configuration.
Or you come to standard. You might say,
Mhm.
hey, all these ports by default, all hosts is turned off unless you belong to these set of hosts, and then yes, you can enable it. For example, so it starts as not just not turned on or off, as you are specifically saying no, they are blocked, they're not available, and then turning them on, going that extra step, that extra layer of security. And because of dual inactivity on my side, my environment just went to sleep. So I was trying to stay ahead. So I click on things and make some suggestions to you. Um, so that those are the things that I wish we had more time, or in the future we can touch upon that if we want to have a deeper dive, or if there's um, a request or a demand for it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I was definitely thinking of a deeper dive into Red Hat Satellite, maybe using AWS architecture or infrastructure.
mhm.
Our lab environment's a little bit limited. In fact, if you go through the hands-on lab, you'll see that you have to jump through a couple of hoops just to get the host to register with the satellite server.
Yeah,
Um, versus like Shantanu was talking about, uh, subnets and setting up UDP broadcasts, that kind of thing, for like Pixie boot configurations. And if you can set something up like that, there's actually satellite has the ability to do discovery, so
mhm.
it can watch a certain network segment and say, "Oh, there's a new host," and work with that host to get it registered all
Right.
automatically.
And for example,
I
on
gotta
the
tell you, Richard,
infrastructure,
I kind of wanna build a new satellite environment and try some of these
tell me
things.
when, I'll give you a hand.
Might have to wait for after RHEL 9.5's out.
Right, right. So on the infrastructure side, one thing I do want to just going to touch very lightly upon. We can't really do a show and tell. Is the Vert Who configuration. So for
Yes.
those folks that have a RHEL subscription with a virtual data center, and it's like, well, how do I configure my Vert Who? Here's some of the tooling that is actually incorporated to help you get started. I wouldn't say is the end all be all how to do it, but at least gets you halfway there, because everybody's environment tends to be their own bespoke, very special environment that is very unique to them. So this at least gets you started, and then you can able to tweak it to meet your needs, be very specific, right? Because most people will actually have that available at the lab portal, under the access.redhat.com on the portal. There's a
Mhm.
lab section, and there was a tool to help you, generate a generic Vert Who. Well, if you're in a air gap environment, you wish you had something like that. Well, it's actually baked in onto satellite for that very reason, to make those niceties be available to you in those offline environments, or just right there. Don't have to think about it much. As well, if you had other satellite capsules, that's the same area where you would go under the infrastructure segment. Um, When you have a satellite subscription, we by default, I believe you get 50 satellite infrastructure subscriptions. Those are meant for to run both satellite and capsules. Most environments will have one per data center. If they have hundreds or thousands upon thousands of hosts, they might have quite a few capsule or satellite servers. If you are running out, if you consume 50 of them and you need more, contact your friendly Red Hat sales associate or engineer. We'll be more than glad to see what we can do to help you out. We just had to pick a number. Somebody threw a dart on the board, and 50 was the number that they went out with. Um, so that is something you can always keep in mind. Was there anything else? There's one other thing that's kind of on topic, off topic, but go ahead, Eric.
So I want to address a couple of questions that we had in chat before we
Mhm.
moved on to our wrap up.
Mhm.
The first was from Joshua. Joshua asks, use the Ansible system roles in satellite. What RPMs need to be installed on your clients?
Well, actually, by default, if you have a RHEL 8 and RHEL 9, system roles is a non-issue. Is baked into the OS. RHEL 7 is when it's going to get interesting. I don't. I don't know if we've expanded system roles to RHEL 7. I don't think we have.
It's not installed natively, but
Yeah. Hmm.
most system roles are supported on RHEL 7. But to answer Josh's
7.9.
yes, to answer Josh's specific question, no packages are
Yeah.
required beyond the base OS
Hmm.
for RHEL clients. Everything is managed from the satellite server. So as long as your satellite server can talk to your end devices, you can run Ansible system roles. It doesn't require any software on other than like SSH on the end
It's on by
of the client.
default, so you're good.
Yeah. Um, so Shantanu asks if satellite software is also part of CS9. I'm assuming that's CentOS Stream. The question would be no, satellite is not supported, is a Red Hat product. It's designed for RHEL. In
Yeah.
fact, we get asked this question quite frequently. Well, why doesn't satellite support XYZ distribution? And the answer is that Red Hat is really good at building and engineering Red Hat things, and the farther away from RHEL that you get, the
Mhm.
less confident that we are with managing it. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Satellite is not a multi-Linux distribution tool. It's one
Correct.
of the reasons why Satellite doesn't manage network hosts or like
Mhm.
switches and routers. The more you add into it, the more congested everything becomes. So Red Hat Satellite focuses on Red Hat Enterprise Linux.
I just like the car analogy. You wouldn't go to a Chevrolet dealership with a Ford and say, "Can you work on this car?" By the way, it's like it's a car.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The nuance that they're not properly equipped or have the training and to be able to support it. It's the same way. We are well equipped to support RHEL and Red Hat products and the knowledge base. Other distributions, you know, it would be more of a, hey, we'll try our best, but this is not our specialty.
So Shantanu asks
Mhm.
kind of a paired question here. Does Satellite entertain hosting a container registry, something like PKG repos? And I thought we had a container registry. Maybe I'm thinking of Ansible Automation Platform.
So when Satellite 6.0 was first released, it could actually hold containers in the OS tree. That has been deprecated for quite a version, 6.15, about to go on 6.16, pretty soon. So we haven't supported that feature set. Now we have Quay within Red Hat, and that is a container repository that we do sell and support. Um, but as I said, you know, Satellite's a great content management. They can hold a tarball. Would I do a registry without all the bells and whistles? I probably wouldn't. I probably want something, especially if you want in production.
Hmm.
So those are the things I would ask. If you're, it's one thing when you're tinkering versus I want to take this to production and my business depends on it.
Well, there's so much nuance with container registries versus, say, package repos.
Yeah,
You've got tagging, you've got version numbers, you've
the
got
layering.
layering configuration files in it
Yeah,
in the container file itself. So Satellite does not, and thank you for clarifying because even I'd forgotten that that had been deprecated.
yeah,
But yeah, Quay would be your solution there, Shantanu.
and it's also included on OpenShift
Hmm.
container infrastructure. Quay is
Yep.
part baked in as well.
Yep. Yeah. So build a container registry within your OpenShift cluster.
Hmm.
So you had one other point you wanted to make. You've dubbed you've dubbed this model. You're calling the Red Hat Infrastructure Standardization Adoption Model. So why don't
Model.
you tell us a little bit about it? A
So yeah, that's a mouthful. Say that
little
fast.
bit.
That's like I saw you try. So the whole idea is, what is it going to take to have a infrastructure as code? We've been hearing that for years, right? And it sounds great, But then you go, well, what is it really going to take to do so? And what would be the advantage? Where are we going to achieve? And the whole idea is to have like an end-to-end, you know, life to death of your infrastructure, be able to deploy it, be able to have address any security challenges you have, be able to have a standard within your organization. The whole idea of be able to define your operating system, the applications that you run on them, the way you authenticate those applications, the way you automate. It really requires all these components. And some fellow Red Hatters, thinking of a certain Mike that I see every once in a while in our meetings, who basically we did a presentation about this a few years back, in which to really have a standard adoption, you need to have certain components. You want to have a centralized authentication for your hosts, and so you can manage those IDs. You want to have a content management engine that you can control what you present to your host and build your host and patch your host. A way to orchestrate all those instances, and of course, we'll add Red Hat products to do so. But the concept is really all those components that you need. So as I mentioned those things, most people are thinking, okay, so there he's talking about IDM for the authentication, central authentication for all the Linux systems that can authenticate and have access to services, mount points, capabilities, or elevated uh, security profiles, or the ability to utilize satellite to put out there the updates and patches that need to take place. And in this case, would be Ansible automation for the orchestration of all of these things, to for both the laydown of the OS, the patching, the maintenance, the rollback process, maybe even creating a snapshot of the host before you even attempt to patch the host. In case something goes wrong, you can roll that back. And if you've done this quite well, you have a nice workflow. You can begin from zero to full deployment and have different iterations of it. I have a full history of them, which helps also in the DR space. Uh, I used to say documentation. It's not real. Automation is not documentation. You just written all the scripts, but it is a good starting point for the documentation of your environment. What it is, how to use it, how to deploy it, how to update it, and it also gives you a good way of having a better visibility of your environment. And over the long term, by taking that approach, your ability to reduce the technical debt as years go by, and your ability to upgrade to a newer OS, it helps. Obviously, sometimes we're dictated what OS we run by the vendor of a specific application that has only been validated to run on a specific version of the OS that it's a few years old, and you've been pleading with your vendor, please, can you update it? We'll pay you. Please, just update the application so we can get off this particular version of the OS. So that is the approach that actually for years Red Hat has had that approach, but they coined the phrase of the Red Hat infrastructure standard adoption model. Boy, it's a mouthful. I just think of infrastructure as code, and having a standardized approach in deployment. Yes, that's really at the end of the day what you want to do, and to be also be able to upgrade systems in a much easier fashion since you've automated the whole process of the building of such system. And I've been talking for a little while. Any thoughts, Eric?
No, I like it. I was just getting caught up on chat. Apologies, but yeah, I
No
mean,
worries.
it's automation and documentation are huge pieces of a sysadmin's life, and the more time you spend on automating and making predictable configurations, the easier your life will be, and the more time you can spend, I don't know, hanging out with a couple of Red Hatters on a live stream.
Hmm. I mean, when people ask me, so if you were to build your dream infrastructure, I would always say, well, yes, I would absolutely have a satellite server. I would absolutely have an IDM server. I would have an Ansible automation platform, AAP, and I would drive everything from the AAP server. Meaning,
Yep.
the patching is going to happen from there. It's going to orchestrate it. And you might ask, like, why would you want to do that, Richard? I mean, you already have satellite. Yes, absolutely. But if I am patching production, I'm not just patching production. I'm usually going to be talking to the security team. I'm going to be talking to the networking team. I'm talking to the QA, to the dev team before we're making these changes during our maintenance window. I could have the orchestration tool to go ahead and talk to the, I don't know, load balancers to reduce traffic to the production, to this pilot group we're going to change, and then bring the services down, push the new code, validate the code's there, automate the whole QA process. So instead of taking 45 minutes to 2 hours, 20 minutes. Test is automated. At the end, you get a pass fail. And though those maintenance window seems to have gained so much more time because you've automated all those steps that could take hours to complete. That's when it gets really, really interesting.
So I can think of no place better to get that kind of inspiration and that kind of direction than our very own Red Hat YouTube channel, our own very own RHEL YouTube channel, I should say.
Mhm.
So as we've pretty well exhausted the questions in chat, and we've run off our planned comments for this episode, as Scott would say. I really want to thank everybody for joining us in this mini series. Richard, thank you for giving up some of your very valuable time to come and hang out and talk about satellite, share your experience. This would not have been nearly as much fun if I did it by myself.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. You know me, I look for any opportunity to talk about satellite and RHEL and how we can make somebody's life better.
For sure. So if you're new to our channel, definitely subscribe, hit the like button so we know that you like content like this. In fact, our own Nate Lager is working on an IDM mini-series, probably about 4 or 5 episodes, very similar in nature to this one.
Very apropos.
Yeah, so I smirked when you mentioned running IDM.
Hmm.
And in fact, if you go to Red Hat Ansible's YouTube channel, they've got a ton of content on AAP for not just RHEL, but also OpenShift, Windows networking. So you can start to learn how to use our tools using nothing but YouTube. And of course, there's self-paced labs for all of this. And while this does bring us to the end of our Red Hat Satellite mini-series, I know that Satellite will continue to be a topic of conversation on RHEL Presents and as well as some of our other content. So definitely subscribe to our channel and keep an eye out on new content that's coming. Speaking of new content, Into the Terminal will be live tomorrow. If you're catching this on the day of recording, Into the Terminal is live on Fridays at noon Eastern. Tomorrow we'll have a special guest, J-Scar, who you've probably seen loitering around Red Hat events. He's an amazing technical account manager at TAM. So he and Nate are going to be at the helm of Into the Terminal, talking about complying with CIS benchmarks. So we were talking a bit about OpenSCAP today. So go see what that's all about. RHEL Presents, our flagship show, is on hiatus a little bit. We've been having some scheduling issues between hosts and guests and just, internal things. But we hope to get that show back on its feet here very, very soon. I love getting together with new guests every couple of weeks and talking about RHEL or talking about the Linux industry itself. So definitely stay tuned for future RHEL Presents episodes. We're hoping to get a high availability episode here in the very near future. I'm just trying to pin a
Fun
guest down
stuff.
to a date. So
I have some fun
definitely
stories in that end.
right, definitely a ton of content for you to consume. Definitely check out our labs at lab.redhat.com and check out more on our YouTube channel. In the meantime, thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate your time. On behalf of my guest star co-host Richard Rios, I've been Eric the IT guy Hendricks, and on behalf of the entire Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.